Hey guys, so what if I told you for the first time in years, buyers in Los Angeles might actually be gaining leverage? Not full control, not yet, but real leverage. We're seeing homes sit longer, we're seeing price reductions, we're seeing sellers actually respond to offers instead of just saying, next. And for the first time in a while, buyers aren't being forced to waive every contingency just to stay in the game. Now that doesn't mean it's suddenly easy to buy a house in Los Angeles. We know that's not the case. Doesn't mean prices are crashing, and it definitely doesn't mean buyers are running the show. But something is changing. And if you understand that shift correctly, you can take advantage of it. And if you don't, you can very easily misread the market and either overpay or miss opportunities that are in front of you. So, the big question is Los Angeles, especially the Valley, finally becoming a buyer's market? Or is it just a temporary slowdown before things pick up again? Because how you interpret this moment really matters. You could either overpay by thinking it's still 2021 or make one of the smartest, most strategic purchases we've seen in years. Let's take a look. Okay, so section 1, what is a buyer's market? So before we even talk about Los Angeles specifically, we need to define what a buyer's market actually is. Because people throw that term around all the time. And most of the time, they're not actually using it correctly. At a high level, a buyer's market means there are more homes available than buyers. Homes are sitting longer, sellers are forced to negotiate, and buyers have leverage. Not just on price, but on terms. But here's the key thing that drives all of that: inventory. How many homes are available relative to how many buyers are actually in the market. Because if you have a lot of buyers chasing very few homes, that creates competition, that creates urgency, that creates bidding wars. And that's exactly what Los Angeles has looked like for the most of the last decade. Now, typically, the way we measure this is in months of inventory. So let's say 0 to 4 months, is a seller's market. 4 to 6 months is more of a balance. 6+ months that the home sits, now the buyer is more in charge, and we're kind of more into a buyer's market. And LA has basically been living that 0 to 4 range for years. Even when things slowed down a little, it was still competitive. It was still tight, it was still tilted towards sellers. So when people say the market is shifting, what they usually mean, it's become less aggressive for sellers, not that it has fully flipped into a buyer's market. And that distinction matters, because if you misunderstand that, you're either coming too aggressive as a buyer and lose deals, or you come in too passive and miss opportunities. All right, section 2, what the data is saying. Let's talk about what's actually happening right now, because this is where things get interesting. So prices. You've probably seen headlines saying prices are down 4 to 5% year over year. But that doesn't mean that every single home is suddenly cheaper. What it actually means is the median price, the middle of the market, is lower. And that can happen for a few different reasons. Maybe more lower priced homes are selling. Maybe fewer luxury homes are closing. Or maybe there is some actual softening in the certain price points. But it's not a straight line down. It's not crash, it's more of a shift. Now, days of the market. Now, this is one of the biggest indicators of what's changing. So homes are taking longer to sell. Now we're seeing averages closer to 80 days, compared to around 69 days last year. And depending on your type of property, you're seeing homes sit for 90 or even 100+ days. Now that's a big change, because for a long time in LA, speed was everything. Homes would come on the market and be gone within a week. Now there's some breathing room. Inventory is also creeping up. And this is huge, because for years, the biggest issue in LA has been not enough homes. So now we're starting to see more listings hitting the market, fewer buyers jumping immediately. So the more options, so that's more options overall, and when buyers have options, everything slows down. They don't feel rushed, they don't feel desperate, they start to think more strategically. So when you combine all of this, prices slightly softening, inventory increasing, homes taking longer to sell, that equals more leverage for buyers. But again, not a full buyer's market. All right, section 2.5. Why there isn't a crash. Now this is where a lot of people get confused. They hear prices are down, homes are sitting, and they immediately jump to, this is 2008 all over again, but it's not. Because 2008 wasn't a slow market, it was a forced selling environment. People had bad loans, adjustable rates were resetting, people couldn't afford their payments, so they had to sell, or they lost their homes. Now that created a flood of inventory. That's what crashed the market. Today, that's not what happened. That's not what's happening. Most homeowners have fixed low interest rates, equity in their home, and no real pressure to sell. So instead of panic selling, what we're seeing is just hesitation. Sellers are testing the market, they're adjusting pricing, they're waiting longer. That's not a crash, that's just a reset. All right, section 3, what it feels like. So let's bring this into the real life. Okay, so this is where people either understand the market or completely misread it. In 2021, a home hits the market on Thursday, open house over the weekend, 10 to 20 offers by Monday. It was nuts. Everything waived, selling way over asking. But today, that same home hits the market, gets decent traffic, maybe a few offers, buyers ask questions, sellers negotiate. That's a completely different dynamic. So this mindset is the biggest shift happening right now. Before, buyers were asking, what do we need to do to win? Now they're asking, how long has this been sitting? Do you think they'll negotiate? Should we wait for a price drop? Are we overpaying? That change in mindset is everything, because mindset drives behavior, and behavior drives the market. Okay, so section 4, why this is happening. So there are a few major reasons behind this shift. Interest rates are higher, right? That reduces buying power, that reduces demand. Buyers are more cautious and they're thinking things through more. Inventory is slightly higher, so there's more choice. And sellers are adjusting expectations. All of that combined slows things down. Okay, so section 5, the valley. Now let's zoom into the valley, because this is where things get more nuanced. Not all homes are behaving the same, and this is where a lot of buyers get tripped up. So you could have 2 homes, right? Same price range, same general area, but one is fully renovated, well-designed, priced right, and the other is outdated on a busy street and overpriced. Those are not competing in the same market. The first one still gets attention, still moves relatively quickly. The second one, it sits, gets price reductions, eventually negotiates. And if you treat those as the same as a buyer, you're gonna make mistakes. All right, section 6, where buyers have power. So this is where buyers should be focusing. Homes that have been sitting for 30, 45, 60 plus days, homes that are clearly overpriced, homes that need work, and most importantly, terms. Because this market isn't just about price, it's about structure. That's what you want to focus on. And what does buyer leverage really look like, right? So buyer leverage doesn't just mean throwing out low ball offers. It means negotiating intelligently. Credits, repairs, rate buy downs, better contingency, flexible timelines. Sometimes it's not about getting the lowest price. It's about getting the best overall deal that will ultimately lead to a smooth and clean close. All right, section 7, where sellers still win. So let's be clear, great homes, like I mentioned earlier, will still win. If a home is a turnkey, well-designed, priced correctly, it's still going to move. Inventory is still not high enough for a true buyer's market. So if you're a seller and your home fits that criteria, you're okay. So the smart buyers right now are strategic. So they're targeting the right properties. They're structuring strong offers. They're not just trying to win on price, they're trying to win the deal. All right, section 8, final verdict. So is LA a buyer's market? Not fully, but it is moving in that direction. We're in the middle, and that's where opportunity lives. All right, so let's recap. The biggest mistake right now is thinking that it's still 2021. It's not. And the people who understand that shift are the ones who win. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help. And if you like the video, like that, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, thanks guys.